Avery and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to go over the basics of how to read sheet music. Before we get into the video, I just want to make a quick disclaimer that although I am a piano teacher, everybody teaches differently and what works for me and my students might not work for you. Videos online and apps and things like that are not going to be the same as actually going to a teacher in person because they will be able to see what you're doing and correct your mistakes, whereas if you're teaching yourself, you may still be able to get really far, but there also might be things that you're not seeing that you're doing that are wrong. But without further ado, let's get on into how to read sheet music. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to use a song that we all know, Amazing Grace. And you can find so many different arrangements of this song, but this is just a really easy one from this book, Church Songs for Kids. There are obviously like so many places you can find it, though you can go into practically any music store and probably find this song. It is everywhere online, so it's not hard to find. But I just thought this was a really good one to show you guys for this video. So the first thing I want to go over is the different types of notes that you're going to see. The first one is a quarter note. This one gets one beat. Now we're not going to go super in depth to counting in this video, but I will try to make another video where we go more in depth on how to count, use the metronome, all of that. But for now, all you need to know is the quarter note is going to get one beat. The next one is a dotted quarter note. It looks just like a quarter note, but there's a dot next to it, hence the name. And this gets 1.5 counts, which is a little bit confusing for some people. And we don't have any dotted quarter notes in this song, but you may see them in some of the beginner songs you will encounter. So I just wanted to point that out. Next is a half note. This one gets 2 counts. After that, we have a dotted half note, much like the dotted quarter note. It's just a half note with a dot next to it, and this gets 3 counts. And then we have our whole note. This, of course, gets 4. Then we have our eighth notes. Sometimes you will see an eighth note by itself, and it looks like this. Other times, you will see eighth notes connected together. This is really common, and they each get half a count. So if you're counting them, you would count them as 1 and 2 and, because they each get half. So keep in mind, if you're playing eighth notes, they're going to be faster than the quarter note. Another thing you may also see is what's called a tie. It's a little curved line connecting 2 of this exact same note. So for example, if we have one note on this line, and then in the next measure we have a note on the very same line, and it's connected by this tie, instead of playing it twice, as you may think, we're going to play it once in the beginning and hold it for the combined count of the 2 notes. So for example, here we have a dotted half note connected to a half note. So since a dotted half note gets 3 counts and a half note gets 2 counts, I'm going to hold this for 5 counts instead of playing it once for 3 and once for 2. Hopefully that makes sense. Another thing I would like to point out quickly is that the round part of your note, whether it's a quarter note, half note, whatever it may be, is called the head of the note, and the long part is called the stem. Another thing we're going to quickly go over is finger numbers in piano. We obviously have 5 fingers. Our thumb is our first finger, then 2, 3, 4, 5. Some people like to think of it as this is our first finger, but that's not how we use it in piano because this is our first. Next, we're going to go over how to find letters on the piano because each key does have a letter name. So on the piano, we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then we start over. We don't go any further. It just goes in order of the alphabet all the way to G and then start back over at A, and it continues that all the way up the piano. Today, we're not going to worry about the names of the black keys because those are a little more complicated, but for the white keys, we start at A, we go all the way up at the piano, and we're going to end on C. Now, if you have a smaller keyboard, this might not be the case. You might not have all of these keys on your piano. A really important note to know is middle C. It's going to be obviously in the middle of your piano, and C is right before our set of 2 black keys. You'll notice on the piano we have sets of 2 black keys and we have sets of 3 black keys. To find C, you're going to find the set of 2 black keys, and you're going to play the note right before them, and that's your C. If it's in the very middle of the piano, that's your middle C. We only have one middle C, and it's used a lot. It's really important to know kind of as a guide note. From there, we can easily find all our other notes. We can go down 2, and we'll know that we're at A. If we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we've played all of them, and we start over again at A. Also, some people can get confused what is down the piano and what is up the piano. The lower the sound is, that means it's down the piano. The higher the sound is, that means it's up the piano. So for example, this is a low sound, so that's going to be down the piano to the left. That's a high sound, so that's going to be up the piano to the right. So if anyone ever says to like move your hand down 2 notes, you're going to go to the left 2 notes. If they say move up, you're going to go to the right. Now that we've gone over that, we're going to talk about some of the things you will see on the staff lines. This is what we play on. It's called the grand staff, and I'm going to break it down for you to make it really easy to understand. The first thing you're going to notice is the treble clef, and all this tells us is to play with our right hand. So any notes you see on the top of our grand staff where we have treble clef, those are right hand notes. Of course, there are exceptions. Sometimes the left hand goes into the treble clef and the right hand plays where the left hand should be, but for now, we're staying right hand in treble clef. And then the other one on the bottom is called the bass clef. Easy to remember because it's on the bottom, it's the bass. The next thing we're going to talk about is time signatures, and I could go into detail with this forever because there are so many different time signatures and just so much that goes into it, but I'm going to break it down and just go over it really quickly for you guys so that you kind of just understand what they are. But before we do that, you do need to understand what a bar line and a measure is. Bar lines are these vertical lines in our music that separate the music into measures. And this is what makes it easier to count so that you're not counting to 100 in the song. It also makes it easy if somebody wants to refer to a spot in the song, they can say measure 3 or measure 10. This is where the time signatures come in. Every measure is going to have the exact same number of beats. This means there can be a different amount of notes. There could be 20 notes in a measure, there could be 1 note in a measure. But it is all going to add up to the same amount of beats in every measure for the entire song, unless your time signature changes. So for example, if you have a 4/4 time signature, you are going to have 4 beats in every measure. So you're going to count, if you're counting your notes out, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, start over again, 1, 2, 3, 4. For every measure in the song, it's going to stay the same. You can have any amount of notes, but it will add up to the same amount of counts. In this song, I have a 3/4 time signature, which means there's going to be 3 beats in a measure. There is also a 2/4 time signature, and there's a bunch of other ones that we could go into, but we're not going to do that today. Now you may be wondering what the 4 on the bottom means. This just tells us that all of the notes I went over with you in the beginning of this video have those amount of counts. So for example, a quarter note will get 1 count, a whole note will get 4 counts. This does change when you get into some more advanced music, and the whole note may not get 4 counts, but for now, you can know that it does as long as your time signature has a 4 on the bottom. Now we already talked about bar lines, which separate the music into measures, but now we're going to talk about double bar lines. So you will see this at the end of a song. It is a bar line like we've seen before, next to a thick line. This is called a double bar line, and it just tells us that it's the end of the song. We're not going to keep going. If you see a double bar line with 2 dots in front of it, that means it's actually a repeat sign. And this means to go back and play from the beginning. So for example, if I got to the end of my song and there was a repeat sign, I would go back to the beginning of my song, play through the whole thing again. This is different sometimes. Sometimes you'll play through just 1 line of the song again. Sometimes you play through the whole thing again, but just know that a repeat sign means to go back and repeat. The last thing I want to get into before we actually talk about how to find notes on the staff lines is your dynamics. Dynamics are what tells us how loud or soft to play on the piano. Now, if you have a keyboard, some are able to do dynamics, some keyboards will not. If you're on a regular piano, you'll be able to do dynamics, but this is just how soft or how hard you press into your key. So for example, if I push down really hard on the key, it's going to be a louder sound than if I were to press really soft. So there are 4 basic dynamics I'm going to go over with you really quick. There are obviously a bunch more that we could go over, but for the sake of this video, again, we're just going to go over a few basic ones that you will see most often. The first is a P. This stands for piano, and this means to play soft.
The next one is MP. This stands for mezzo piano.
And this means a little bit louder than soft, but it's still pretty soft. The next one is MF. This stands for mezzo forte. And mezzo forte is right in the middle. It's not too loud, but it's also not too soft. The last one we're going to go over is forte, and this means to play loud. Now, of course, there are many other ones that we could go over, and maybe that'll be another video. But for today, those are the 4 that you're going to need to know. Okay, let's get into how to actually read notes on the staff. So we've already learned our notes on the piano. We know A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now, how do you find those on the staff lines and then play them on the piano? Each line and space on the staff is a note on the piano. The easiest way to memorize these notes in the beginning is going to be to memorize sayings to find your notes on the staff lines. Now, eventually you will get to the point where you won't need these sayings so much and you will just recognize the notes by looking at them. You can look and say, oh, that's a B, that's a G, that's an A. I've seen so many different sayings out there, but here are the 4 that I usually teach. We're going to start with the bass clef. We have different sayings for each line and space in the treble clef and bass clef. They're all different because they're different notes. In the bass clef, we're always going to go from bottom to top. So our notes on the bass clef lines are G, B, D, F, A. So a saying that we can use for that is good boys do fine always. Next, for the bass clef, we have our spaces. They're going to be all cows eat grass, and we like to add because sitting right above the bass clef staff. This just makes it easy because B is a really common note we'll see in the bass clef, and so if you add because on top of that, it's just an easy way to find it, so you don't have to remember it. So our letters for the bass clef spaces are A, C, E, G, B. Next, we're going to the treble clef, and we're going to start with the lines E, G, B, D, F. So a saying we can use for this is every good boy does fine. Next, we have the treble clef spaces, and funny enough, we actually don't need a saying for these because if you start at the bottom and go up, F-A-C-E, it spells face. So if you just remember that the treble clef spaces are face, then that's really easy to find your notes. Now, say I have an E in my treble clef. How do I know which E to play on the piano? Can I play any E? Does it matter? Yes, it does matter. Each note on the piano is a different place on the staff, so we can't just say, oh, that's an E, and play any E we want on the piano because then our song won't come together like we want it. So, for example, this E in our song is on the bottom line of the treble clef. This is going to be your E right next to middle C. So it's 2 notes above middle C. That is the E that it wants. You can't play any other E for that one because it's not the same. We also have a D next to that. Now, is that going to be a D up here? No, it's going to be the D right a step down from E. So just remember to check your notes when you're playing and make sure you're playing the correct C on the piano or the correct G on the piano. For example, the first note of this song is G in the bass clef. This is the top space in our bass clef, so I know that this is the G below middle C, very close, it's just 3 steps down. And that's the only G we can play for that one, because if we played a different one, it wouldn't sound like Amazing Grace. It would sound very different. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a little bit confusing, but the more you practice, the more you'll get used to it and it'll all start to make sense. Okay, well, hopefully you have found this video helpful. I know that some things may be confusing in the beginning and you cannot learn piano in one video, but with some practice, hopefully this has helped you kind of learn and understand how to read sheet music a little bit better. If you have questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I am open to answering as much as I am able. But hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos, as that really helps the channel. Let me know if there's a video you want to see on a particular topic, maybe that you're struggling with, and I will try to do that. I hope you enjoyed, and happy playing!